Please be seated. Before we consider today's scripture and message, I first want to thank our choir. Thank you so much for your leadership and sharing your gifts. I appreciate it. I also want to extend a word of thanks to all of our army of volunteers that have made church possible this morning. On any given Sunday when we gather together, over 1,000 people will worship in our church across 6 different services. Many hundreds more adults and children will engage in Christian education and fellowship and discipleship and Sunday school classes and serving opportunities and this and that and the other. And all of it is possible because of an army of people who faithfully serve their church and the kingdom in a million different ways. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. My name is Lance Marshall. Welcome. I'm the Senior Associate Pastor here at First United Methodist Church of Fort Worth. I want to extend my greeting and welcome to you. I also want to extend a greeting on behalf of our Senior Pastor, Dr. Tim Brewster. He's not here today. He's out spending some time with his family. The last time I filled in the sanctuary, I let everyone know that Tim wasn't with us because he was enjoying an awesome camping trip in Canada. And so he came back and everybody was so excited to hear about his trip to Canada and so glad that he had a chance to escape the heat and to spend some time in Canada. And he and Susan deeply appreciated those words of kindness and thanks. It was confusing because I told everyone they were in Canada and they were in Brownwood, Texas, which is the most non-Canadian place on the face of the planet. So I believe he is in northern Michigan with his family this week and next week. There's an equally good chance he's in like Wichita Falls or something. I have no idea. My directions are good to within about 1,500 miles, so I'm not exactly sure where he is. I know that I am here, and I am blessed and honored to be here. I'll also be here next week. Now, normally, as Mike mentioned, I preach every Sunday here at the church. I lead a community called The Gathering. The Gathering are 2 services of worship that take place in Wesley Hall, and it's a contemporary, more casual opportunity. It's a new place. It's a new opportunity for worship, and we started a new thing so that we could reach new people, and that's been an exciting part of the life of our church. And so I'm normally there, but I grew up and came to know Christ in communities of worship just like this. And so I'm always honored and appreciative for a chance to be in here. And so one of the things that is core to my ministry, it's core to what I do every single day, every single week in my work of ministry, something I am just so focused on that I think about all the time is the question, how can I take faith? How can I take following Jesus? How can I take what it is to be a Christian and how can I take parts of it that some people might find intimidating or maybe confusing or maybe uncertain? How can I take these different barriers to people's faith and engagement and coming to know Christ and love Christ and live as a Christian? How can I take things and whenever possible reduce barriers for them, explain things to them, maybe make things seem a little less crazy or a little less weird or at least just a little less confusing or uncomfortable? You'll see that if you ever attend the gathering because we have so many new people who are engaging faith for the first time or for the first time in a long time. We'll explain things really simply there. Every single time we come to worship in that community, we always do communion, and every single time I explain exactly how communion works. You're going to come down the center aisle when I say so. You're going to hold your hands like this. A piece of bread's going to be placed in your hand. You take it, you dip it, right? We literally explain everything. Same thing happens in the Bible study that I lead. Whenever we're doing a Bible study, right now we're studying the Gospel of John, Wednesday night Bible study, I always point out, okay, there's 4 Gospels that begin the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can find it in your table of contents. Let's turn there, right? Because I don't want anyone to ever have to face things as obstacles, right? Or take elements of faith or of following Jesus and make them confusing or difficult. I want to explain things, make them simple as much as possible, right? Help people become comfortable with the tenets of who we are and who we're called to be. And so one of the things I've noticed, though, over time, is that it's not just the new people, right? It's not just the new Christians. It's not just the people who are exploring faith for the first time or maybe just kicking tires on the whole faith thing for the first time. It's not just those people who have things that give them anxiety or make them uncomfortable, right? It's all of us. I've learned this is the beginning of my 6th year in ministry at this church, and I've learned over time that all of us, no matter how long you've been here, right, we literally have families in our community who are grandparents, yet they met each other in the nursery of the church, right? Doesn't matter how long you've been in this church or in any church, right? So many of our people have things about faith, right, or about being a faithful follower of Jesus or about being a Christian that can still be uncomfortable for them, or still seem intimidating, or still seem difficult, right? And so one of the things that I like to do is approach and teach on those things whenever I can to help lower the anxiety, help lower the frustration, help us feel more comfortable about these issues. Right? One of them I've learned over time is the concept of living generously, right? Of tithing or of giving to your church, right? Of supporting financially the mission of the church and what God has given us to do, right? Every time I go into a church service and I say something along the lines of, okay, today we're going to be talking about giving, what I see back at me are 400 faces thinking, oh, I could have slept in today. Oh, no. I ironed 4 pairs of khakis for this, right? It's one of the things that a lot of people just have anxiety or confusion or uncertainty about what it is to be faithful and live in that way. The second thing that I found over and over again, no matter how long you're in church, one of the things I've realized that people have the most frustration or anxiety or uncertainty about is the concept of evangelism. And today we're going to talk about evangelism. And when I speak out to you today, same thing happened at 9:30. What I see is a couple hundred faces who are thinking, maybe we should go back to the giving talk. Maybe that would be easier. I got to tell you, I'm so excited to be here in the sanctuary today. One of the things you may not realize when you're a preacher, before you come and preach, is you're given blessings by members of the church, right? It's the same thing that happens every church that's ever existed, every tradition. Before you go preach, you'll always get a blessing, and it's a blessing from a saint in the church. It's nothing formal. It's always one of the saints of the church, one of the faithful people in your church, and they come up to you and they always say something along the lines of, have a good word today, right? Or if they're really clever, they'll say, give them heaven out there. Right? They'll give you some blessing, some word of encouragement. Every time before I come and speak, I get the same blessing. It's from a whole bunch of different people. A bunch of different people have given to me. I got it again today. I got it all this week. Hearing I'm going to be in the sanctuary, the blessing I always get is, may you speak more slowly and stand more still. This time, please, Jesus. So I'm doing my best. I want to talk about evangelism this week, and I want to acknowledge that for so many people, the idea of evangelism promotes anxiety, right? The idea of faith sharing, right, is just something that immediately gets categorized as something that is outside of your comfort zone, right? If that feels like you, right, if the idea of faith sharing or helping to articulate your faith so that someone else might come to faith in Christ, if that makes you feel uncomfortable or uncertain, you don't know what, or you don't know how, please know that you are not alone in this space today, right? And part of the reason that evangelism can seem so uncomfortable to us, right, can be so anxiety-producing in so many of our lives is because the people that we tend to lift up or recognize as evangelists are people who, let's call them not normal people. We see a lot of not normal people doing evangelism. Am I right? The number one example of not normal people are the superstars, right? These people who have just incredible gifts of evangelism, right? There's these kind of people who know what to say. They know what to say. They have the words. They have the silver tongue. They're magnetic, right? These are our Billy Graham people, right? These are people who have these incredible gifts or incredible assurance or incredible conviction. This ability to do evangelism is just so natural to them, and they're just so powerful at it. We lift them up as superstars, and we say, I could never be one of them. Every year we have an annual conference. It's something all the United Methodist clergy go to. It's like our annual hootenanny and jamboree. And we go there, and there's awards that get handed out, right? First United Methodist Church won an award this year, an award for reaching out and engaging people, expanding the community of people that we are impacting and making disciples of for Jesus Christ in our community. We won an award this year. The trophy was a gold spray-painted Wesley bobblehead doll, which is currently in Dr. Brewster's office until this afternoon when I steal it and it goes in mine. All right, we won an award this year. There's an individual award. It's handed out every year. It's the Evangelism Award. It gets handed out to a member of our annual conference, clergy or lay, someone who's just incredible at sharing faith. And the award is named the Harry Denman Award. The Harry Denman Award. Harry Denman was born in the late 1800s, died in the 1970s. He was a United Methodist. And he worked in the field of evangelism. He was a lay person. He never went to seminary. He was never ordained. But he was a speaker and a teacher, and he traveled his state. He traveled his community. He traveled the nation. He traveled the world, and all he did was speak and teach and share the good news of Jesus Christ. And he was not an ordinary person. All of his belongings could fit in the vehicle that he was riding in. He owned 2 suits and 2 shirts. Right? Wherever he went and stayed in a hotel, sent him out, got him clean. That's all he wore. That's all he carried. That and a briefcase, right? Because his entire life was about traveling and sharing the good news, right? And allowing other people to encounter the gospel. He didn't even wear a watch. He didn't wear a watch because in not wearing a watch, that freed him up to have a good reason to ask other people the time. Right? Then initiating a conversation with a complete stranger, and more often than not, allowing him to have a moment of sharing his faith, right? That's what the Evangelism Award is named after. And I have to tell you, if I was to ever receive that award, I would be standing up. And while it was being handed to me, I would be thinking to myself, I am no Harry Dentman. Because really, who of us are like that? Who of us are that gifted? Who of us are that strong, right? Who of us are that capable? Those are the superheroes. And when we expect ourselves to be like that, all that does is create an image or an understanding of what evangelism should be that makes us anxious or feel not up to it. Another community of people that we see doing evangelism over and over again are what I will call not normal people. All right? How many of us have experienced evangelism on the other side of somebody who is obviously not as concerned about the constraints of civility or how to behave in public as other people are? Am I right? Right? How many of these people have obviously no concerns about standing out in the public sphere, right? Maybe with some sort of amplification device, right? Exhorting other people to change their hearts and lives and believe this good news if they have polite language. Right? So often instead they behave much, much, much differently. Maybe doing so in a way that's negative. Maybe doing so in a way that's scary, right? Maybe doing so in a way where they just shove tracts into the hands of passersby, right? Over and over and over again, we see evangelism modeled like this. And we think, well, if evangelism is either being a superstar or standing on the street corner yelling into a microphone, then it must not be for me. And if you have those images of what evangelism is or what evangelists are like, then of course that is going to make you feel that it's not for you and you're not up to it. But here's what I have to say. I have to say a reminder to you that the majority of evangelism that's ever taken place, that the vast majority of the kind of evangelism and faith sharing that has ever actually impacted the lives of people, that the overwhelmingly vast majority of the kind of evangelism that has made Christians and changed lives and saved souls, not only around the world, but in this room, that evangelism, that faith sharing, that testimony to who Christ is and what it means to become a follower of His, that kind of evangelism was not done into a stadium microphone, and it was not done on the side of a street. It was done by honest and humble and normal people just like you, amateurs, right? The ungifted, right? The not super brave, the kind of people who don't know exactly what to say, who can't perfectly articulate everything. The overwhelming vast majority of the soul-winning, life-changing, world-saving evangelism that has ever taken place has happened on behalf of people just like you, by people just like you, ordinary people. So that's what we're talking about this week and next week. We're talking about evangelism for ordinary people. And when I'm talking about evangelism, I'm not saying, oh, we should be evangelizing, right? Or it's good to evangelize, or reminding you that Jesus commands us to share good news and to make disciples, right? Or to bring us back into recognition that witnessing is one of the core vows that we make when we join the church. I'm not talking about evangelism in terms of should. We are talking exclusively in terms of how. How do normal, ordinary people actually share faith in the world? Our scripture reading today comes from the New Testament letter from the Apostle Paul to the church in Colossia, the letter to the Colossians. And in this letter, Paul's actually in jail. He's imprisoned. He's imprisoned because of the work that he's done sharing the good news of Jesus, teaching people, forming churches, saving and changing lives, right? He's imprisoned because of this. And he's writing to a church that, just like so many churches then and now, is in the midst of a big and confusing world with so many different agendas and so many different ways of living. And he says, you need to do more pour everything that you can to help people encounter the life-saving good news of Christ. And then he gets into actually teaching how you do that in this passage. First, he says is pray. Pray to God and be alert in your praying. Pray to God. Pray that doors will open. Speak to your God. Pray. And the next thing he says, when you speak to outsiders, when you speak to non-Christians, right? When you speak with them, when you share faith with them, make sure you have something worthy and good to say. Make sure you know how to respond to them. So if you're reading this through that, quickly, you may miss some of the subtext here. When he's telling you to pray, right? When he's telling you to pray, he's telling you to be alert in your prayers. Being alert in your prayers does not mean you're doing an awesome job praying for everything around you, right? Being alert in your prayers does not mean you pray for everyone and don't miss anything. Being alert in your prayers means you are listening. Being alert in your prayers means when you speak to God, right? When you open your heart and your mouth and you reach out to your God, when you speak to your God, being alert in your prayers, he reminds you is to take the time to listen as well. And when you are listening, you listen, God, who is it around me? God, what is it in the community around me that I might know, that I might speak to? Who have you surrounded me with? Where have you placed me? God, I am listening to you. And when he says speaking to the people, right? When he says when you're talking to outsiders, have a word for them, have a word that's like salt, right? That has flavor, that has meaning, that has purpose, right? When you're speaking and you're speaking to their needs, right? He says have that kind of word for them. Let me remind you, the only way that you can ever have a word for somebody that is worth them listening to is if you've listened to them. Do you hear me? He's saying listen to God. And he's saying when you speak, have something worth listening to, meaning you must have gotten to know the person that you're speaking with. And there's where the models on the street corner fall short. And there's where the models in the stadiums fall short. Because remember, not only the majority, not only the vast majority, but the overwhelmingly vast majority of the actual evangelism that's ever taken place in the world that has won souls, that has changed lives, that has made other lives worth living was done in individuals sharing and listening. And it was made possible because the evangelist, because the person with the good news took the time to actually listen. It may shock and surprise you to know that my experiences in teenage dating were not entirely smooth. It was a rocky road. But one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given in my life was from my mom to me in regards to dating in early high school, right? And if the fact that one of the best pieces of ever I got in my life was from my mom about dating indicates just how much I was struggling. But I remember I was going out on some, movie group hang kind of thing, and she catches me, as I'm sure she's about to let me out of the Suburban or something, and she says, remember, ask her questions about herself. Ask her questions about her. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. And I went, okay. And my wife and I will celebrate 9 years married later this month, right? This piece of advice that's always stuck with me. She says, ask people questions about themselves. People love to talk about themselves, right? People love to share. People love to reach out, right? That's a silly, funny piece of advice meant to make you laugh, but it's true. It's true, and people love to talk about themselves not just because they're interested in themselves, right? People love to talk about themselves because each and every one of us desperately wants to be known. Each and every one of us desperately wants a connection with other people. Each and every one of us desperately wants someone else to hear from us, to know us, to care about us. Each and every one of us is drowning in a sea of, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. And that's it. Each and every one of us is desperate to have someone who actually cares enough about us to listen. And the Apostle Apostle Paul, when writing out to this community, reminds us that the very first step in how we actually do evangelism is to listen, first to your God and then to the people around you. Actually listen to them. The first step in you becoming an evangelist, right? And you actually sharing the life-changing good news of Jesus Christ begins with you saying nothing except tell me how you actually are. And when you ask that, you'll get a polite nothing answer. And then you say, no, actually tell me. I actually care. And when people begin to speak to you, when people begin to know that you are actually listening, actually investing, actually caring, they will begin to share with you. And they will begin to share with you so much more than what's going on in their day, so much more than what's going on in their job. They will share what's going on with you in their life. And if you listen closely enough, you will be able to hear what is actually going on in their soul, because everybody in your life, the person in the next office or cubicle, your sister-in-law, your father-in-law, your next-door neighbor, your parents, your children, each and every person in your life was made to reach out and connect to their God, whether they realize it or not. Each and every person that surrounds you is in desperate need of their God. And when you care enough to listen, you'll start to actually figure out what it is that is hurting them, what it is that they're yearning for, what it is that they really need when you care enough to listen. Some of them will start to tell you stories. They'll start to indicate to you that their greatest need is to really understand what their place in this big, scary world is. What's the purpose for being? Why am I here? Why are any of us here? And that unknowing is something that they think about constantly. Some of them, when you begin to really listen, will start to tell you stories, and you will realize that they will be kept up at night, wondering, yearning, angry about why the world isn't better than it is, why the world isn't more fair, why the world isn't more just, why the world isn't more true. And that frustration and that deep desire to be about of some change is the number one thing that keeps them up and moving. Some of them, when you care enough to actually listen, will tell you that what they are desperately searching for is someone worth following who will not let them down. What they're desperately looking for is someone who can actually show them and model them and lead them and guide them into the kind of life worth actually living. That is what they need. Some of them, when you care enough to listen, will start to tell you in many ways, explicit and implicit, that they are buried under the weight of their own past wrongs. That they cannot bring themselves to forgive themselves for the wreckage that they have left in their wake. And every single day is spent whipping their own back for all the misery they've caused themselves and others. And they cannot believe themselves worthy of love. Some of them will just be looking for strength to face another day. Some of them will be caring for people, caring for loved ones. Some of them will be suffering through illnesses. Some of them will be facing relationships falling apart or careers coming to an end. Some of them will have the very foundation disappearing from under their feet, and they are desperately looking for the strength or the guidance or the purpose to just keep on one more day. And when you care enough to listen to the people around you, they will start to share with you not only how they're doing, but what they are desperately needing. And the good news is that Jesus Christ is good news for each and every one of those people. The good news is that no matter who they are or where they're from or what they're experiencing, Jesus Christ is good news to them. For the people who are just wondering what their place in this big, scary world is, Jesus Christ provides them the answer. You, my child, my beloved, are born, are exist, are here to be in relationship with me. That deep question is finally answered for the people who are just so frustrated, who are just so angry, who are just so indignant that the world is not better or more just or more fair or more equitable. They will find in Jesus Christ the good news of not only God agreeing with you, but doing something about it. For all of the people who desperately want someone to follow, who will not let them down, who will not fall short, who will not fail to answer to the test, they will have in Jesus Christ the good news of the one person actually worth not only following, but living for each and every day of their lives. For the people who are just crushing under the weight of their own failures, their own sins, their own wrongdoing, they will find in Jesus Christ the good news of the one person who actually has the power to forgive them and proclaim them clean. And for the people who just need the strength for another day, they will find what millions and millions of people have found, that no matter how tough, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful, life with Christ is life with hope. When you care enough to actually listen, you'll find out what they actually need. And the good news is, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, Christ is good news to them. So we listen. So we move past the question, right? How are you? I'm fine. Good. We move past that. No, how are you really? No, I actually care. No, I actually have time. I care enough to listen. Evangelism for the superstars starts somewhere else. I have no idea. Evangelism for the not normal people with the megaphones or the tracts starts somewhere else. I have no idea. But evangelism for ordinary people, evangelism for you and for me, for everyone else in this room, begins with actually listening. And then what happens next, right? Because remember, it's not just about listening. It's also about sharing, right? Every meaningful moment of testifying to Christ, right? Every meaningful moment of helping someone come closer to the God who made them and loved them, the Christ that redeemed them, and the Holy Spirit that sustains them. Each and every moment like that comes not just from listening, but from speaking back, from having something to say. So the question is, I've listened, what do I actually say? The next step is, in evangelism for ordinary people, I've cared enough to learn what's hurting them, but what do I actually say? I've opened my life. I've opened my heart. I've made a connection. But Lance, the time is here. The moment is ready. I am with my child. I am with my parent. I am with my spouse. I am with my coworker. I am with my father-in-law or my sister-in-law. I am with this other parent on the side of the soccer field. The moment is here. The time is now. What do I actually say? We are out of time. That's a good place to pick up next week. Evangelism for each and every one of us begins with listening. Next week, we'll talk about what to say. Please pray with me. Great and loving God, yours is the good news. Yours is the life eternal. Yours is the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the promise of reconciliation with you now and forever. God, as we go from this place, ordinary people, ordinary gifts, ordinary strengths, let us have an extraordinary love for you and for your kingdom and for your good news to change the hearts and lives of everyone around us. Guide us, keep us, make us into your people. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ, that we all pray and say, Amen.